All right, welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano. I'm a partnerships manager at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, we're really excited to welcome Dan Spaulding, Chief People Officer at Zillow Group, to the podcast. Hi, Dan. How's your morning going?
Hi, Christina. I'm on the West Coast here, so my morning's off to a good start. The sun is finally back here in Seattle, so our spirits are always higher in Seattle when the sun finally returns in spring.
I love that. I think the weather has a huge impact on my mood as well, so we love to hear it. I would love for everyone listening if you could share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns and what you're currently excited about working on at Zillow Group.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Dan Spaulding, he, him, his, and have been the Chief People Officer at Zillow Group for 5 years this coming Sunday, which thank you, which feels, it's been a heavy 5 years to be in the HR profession. A lot has happened and a lot's happened for our company. So, I'm just really humbled and excited to be at Zillow at this time. Working in the shelter business during a global pandemic has been fascinating. I was attracted to Zillow 5 years ago because it was a company with real cultural aspirations that really matched my values, and I've been really fortunate to be a part of a team that's tried to redefine ways that we connect and support employees, and AllVoices obviously is a part of that, and excited to talk about that today. So, and then what I'm really kind of focused on right now is we really came to understand in the pandemic that work was just never going to be the same after what we've all experienced in 2020, and so we were one of the earliest companies to announce what we call our distributed workforce, which is, giving people a lot more flexibility, increasing remote work as a core aspect of the way that we work, rethinking what an office environment looks like when we welcome people back to our offices this coming fall. And so we're deep in kind of reimagining what our workplace is going to look like. And so that is keeping us and me very busy.
Yeah, I can only imagine the future of work, as we were talking about, is rapidly changing, but it's good to know that Zillow is adapting and thinking proactively about how to support the many folks that work at the organization. Can you share a little bit about what really differentiates Zillow's company culture, and tell me a little bit more about how that's changed during the pandemic as well?
Yeah, Zillow, by context is about a 15-year-old company that IPO'd, IPO'd about 10 years ago now. And when I joined 5 years ago, we were about 1,800 employees. And today we're about 6,000 employees. So we have gone through a lot of growth. And we've gone from being a pre-IPO startup to a startup to an IPO to now really scaling into being what probably most of your listeners would consider sort of a large company. So it has been, it has been a journey, but it's one also that our founders, who our CEO Rich Barton is still our founder with his co-founder Lloyd Frank, who founded the company 15 years ago. So our founders are still very involved, and they were serial entrepreneurs and founders. They founded, Expedia, Glassdoor, and other companies like that. And culture was something that they always felt was a differentiator. And they really built a company from the start that focused on showing care, respect for its employees, and then have always challenged themselves and then me when I joined, how we take culture to the next level as the company continues to mature. And so, we can jump into some of our cultural tenets and how those play out, but that's really where, when I think about culture and when I think about Zillow, and certainly one of those things that keeps me here is we just view our business in a constant state of evolution. And
Mhm.
we view the way that we come to work, the way that we partner together, and the way that we support each other is also in a constant state of evolution as your company grows and changes and your business changes. And I mean, wow, nobody experienced that in any greater way than what we all went through in 2020. But I think our culture was kind of built to navigate times like 2020, and so of course our challenge now is how do we take all of those great lessons from last year and then apply them to building a better workplace and a more inclusive workplace coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building an inclusive workplace is on a lot of folks' mind, especially in the business of people and making sure that folks are engaged no matter where they are in the world. And you mentioned, 6,000 employees. That's a lot of people just to get feedback from and to get kind of when you are in the evolution of a business, hearing how they're thinking about things. When you're thinking about building that holistic strategy, what kind of comes to mind when you really want to hear employees and listen to the good, the bad, the ugly of what they're thinking?
Yeah, one of our core values from the start of the company, and it's probably our most important core value, is this concept of turning on the lights.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about Zillow and you think about our other brands, whether it's Trulia or Street Easy, we are about creating data transparency. We are about giving the consumer the power to understand what's going on in their local real estate market and then connect with great real estate professionals that can help guide them through one of life's most complex purchases,
Yeah.
whether you're renting or buying. But that concept of turning on the lights also refers to the way that we manage our culture.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the things that we are focused on is if there's a problem, naming the problem, working the problem, and being honest about the problem. And of course, that's very different when you're a startup of 15 people, how you do that. And then when you're 1,800 people, and of course now when you're 6,000 people. And so for us, at least in the people org, what we have always focused on is creating as many pathways to support as possible. So we do a quarterly survey. We do external, anonymous coaching if employees are looking for coaching on an issue. We obviously use AllVoices so that there's an anonymous reporting venue that employees can access. We also do, open Q&As and live Ask Me Anythings with the executive team, because what we're concerned about is getting to what is really going on, not how complex can we make the mousetrap so that problems don't flow through their system. And obviously, we strive to be a culture that's as direct and as open as possible. But we also recognize that sometimes you just don't know how to have that conversation. And I think particularly today, where we're all scattered across the country, we're all working under a really stressful set of circumstances, that you need as many sort of pathways to support for your employees as possible. And that includes, even making mental health resources available and on-demand, mental health resources available, because, we're all working under a lot of duress right now. And so but that concept of turn on the lights for us is so central, because it's like, we know it's going to change. Our goal is to just do everything we can to illuminate the places where people need information or people need support. And that's our North Star culturally from a people perspective.
I think that's great. Turn on the lights and listen to employees. And I appreciate your point around meeting employees where they are, and you can have the best culture out there, but everyone is bringing in their own experiences as well, in terms of if they feel more comfortable in a one-on-one setting, sending in a question via Q&A, sending in anonymous feedback. So really making it accessible to share thoughts and feelings at work is really important there.
Yeah, I have often said your culture is how you show up for each other every day. And if you show up great, you have a great culture. If you let your team down, then you had a hard day for your culture. And great sustainable companies and great sustainable cultures recognize that you're not always going to get it right. It's how you react to when you get it wrong as a culture. And
Yeah.
and to your point, people are bringing in really heavy life experiences into work, and I think that's going to be the enduring legacy of 2020. Was if for the first time everybody in the company was going through a universally traumatic event of COVID. And then of course that was exacerbated by the political environment and by social unrest and injustice perpetrated on your coworkers and the burden that they carry every day into the office is tremendous. So that this concept for me around culture is, I always believe that two things can be true at once. You can have a great company culture and individual experience vary significantly day to day. And so just because somebody has a bad experience, one day doesn't mean your company culture is not good. It means that you need to know what that experience was and do what you can to address it. And sometimes you can do a lot, sometimes you can't do a lot, but you can be there and you can show up and acknowledge that experience. And I think particularly in the HR profession, that has been a difficult thing for people to get comfortable with. And I would love to say that that we're perfect on that front, but you're dealing with 6,000 humans. There's a lot of experience. So for me, it's just how do we become aware, and then how do we step in to try to own making that experience better for the person tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Acknowledging, listening, and definitely not an experience that is black and white or check the box and say, we have a great company culture. There's nothing else for us to work on. What do you mean you had a bad day? That's not possible. It's also being realistic and kind of, again, being adaptable and, the evolution of the business on a larger scale. And one of the things that you mentioned was there is a lot going on. There's social injustice happening. Everybody's bringing themselves to work. And I know Zillow has really strong employee resource groups. And I want to dig a little bit further into the larger diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy at Zillow, what that is and, what that looks like today.
Yeah, absolutely. We have really had a formalized strategy around what we call equity and belonging. Is where we start from. We start from a standpoint of everybody needs to feel like they belong to the company, and we need to recognize that there are unique barriers that different communities face within corporate America, within America more broadly, and how do we put practices and support in place to drive better equity within our workplace. And it's been a journey for us. It's heavy, and I myself continue to be on my own learning journey on multiple fronts. I think for us, it really started from 4 years ago. We were one of the first companies to publish our pay equity methodology and ensure that there, for similarly situated jobs, that there wasn't a pay discrepancy that couldn't, that a pay discrepancy based on gender or race. And from that work, really, we started to learn how to expand that work. And we started, just by looking at gender. Then we looked at gender and race. Then we looked at the intersectionality of gender and race. And this year, for the first time, we think we're going to be able to report on gender identity and LGBTQ status, because we finally figured out a way that people could anonymously share that we could tie it back to compensation data. So we're on a constant journey of, again, turning on the lights, understanding our own data. How do we share that? And then over the last year, a lot of our work has been around our employee resource groups, our pay equity, which has helped us directionally. We have become a more diverse organization. But we felt after last summer, and certainly our infrastructure and our employee resource groups really helped us to support the communities, and particularly the Black community that really needed support last year, and then drive a lot of education that, frankly, the rest of the organization needs about that experience of what it's like to be Black in America, which certainly, I think we all have a lot of work to do to better appreciate validate and support. And that led us to, really looking at saying, hey, we're making progress, but we're not making enough progress. And so then we really went through our own data and set 3-year commitments around not just recruiting, but retention and career development, continuing pay equity, and really looking, and then and education as well, and recognizing, there aren't quick fixes to. I mean, we are dealing with macro challenges that our country has struggled with for hundreds of years. But at the same time, while there are no quick fixes, you got to commit to making more progress than I think we're collectively making today. And so that's our focus right now, is activating on those 3-year commitments, which you can find on our equity and belonging page at zillowgroup.com. And really now taking that into some super cool work that we're rolling out this week to our senior leadership team, which is real-time data analytics on exactly what's happening within their businesses, what the sentiment of their employees are around belonging and how they feel within their businesses. And then specifically, what does the data tell them where are the places they need to focus within their organization? So we're really focused on activating, because we've got work to do, and waiting isn't going to make these challenges any less significant.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that there are 3-year commitments, they're public, and it sounds like there's a lot of data-driven decisions that are happening. And you're right, change isn't going to happen overnight, but that doesn't mean that we do nothing and, we just say, oh, it's going to happen in a year, it's going to happen in 2 years. And I think a lot of folks are wondering how you do measure this belonging and equity, because sometimes they are intangible feelings. Can you talk a little bit more about how you measure that incremental progress at an organization of 6,000 people, and just how you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, one, we ask our employees if they feel like they belong. And then, of course, we let our employees demographically disclose on a variety of different indicators, whether it's gender identity, whether it's veteran status, and LGBTQ plus status. There is, or identity, not status. So, I mean, we ask our employees the question, and we listen to what they say, and that's where belonging is really difficult to measure, and all of this stuff is really difficult to measure. And to get on my soapbox for a second, we need real legislative action in the U.S. around employment laws, and really making it so that companies can be more explicit of saying, hey, we want to go hire more X, and not have that in and of itself be considered discrimination under the law. Because I think what's really hard for companies is they want to do the right thing,
right?
But then you have these, in my opinion, archaic laws at times that hold us back from being more explicit in terms of creating the types of workplaces that would really be as diverse as they could be. So, we're going to keep pushing on our end. That's not a cop out for us. But I do think that we have to look systemically at our legal system. I mean, obviously, we're having a lot of conversations about what needs to change in a lot of aspects of our legal system right now. I think we need to talk about employment laws as well, because I think there's just a lot of area for improvement that could really help U.S. businesses to accelerate the diversification at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. These conversations are definitely not happening in silos, and I think you're right. We definitely have to address issues around the systemic nature that has been going on for hundreds of years as well. And we're all doing our part to make sure that progress is happening, but seeing it in the larger picture, I definitely agree with you there too. I also wanted to dig a little bit deeper into, you're building this culture of trust and inclusion. How do you see this really manifesting in the business? If you can share like a couple examples of really the impact on your community and the folks at Zillow.
I was really fortunate to work at Starbucks before I came to Zillow, and Starbucks was just this incredible organization on multiple levels. But what I learned the most at Starbucks was that you don't dictate culture to employees. You influence culture. You inspire culture. When you trust employees and treat them like adults and treat them with respect, they show up for your brand in big ways. And I think, to me, Starbucks is the best example of this in American business. You can go into your Starbucks in Brooklyn and get the same experience that you get at a Starbucks in Boise, Idaho. And that's not because they're dictating and hammering those baristas. It's because they treat those baristas like the professionals that they are, which they are incredible. If you're making that many coffee drinks in a day, and that is what we try to do. And when we talk about treating our employees with trust and respect and transparency, we then in turn watch that flow through to our business. We think one of the things that makes Zillow Group unique is in an industry that is very confusing for consumers to navigate. That we can create a sense of trust back and forth with the consumer and with our partners and the agents that advertise through our platform. We are able to translate that trust and that transparency to our customers. And our growth so much over these last 3 years has been going into new and experimental businesses like iBuying, where you make a direct cash offer for a home and people don't have to go through the difficulty of selling their home. That all comes back to the relationship that customer has with the representative within Zillow that they're working with. And that comes from the way that employee feels. From the belonging to the respect angle, and we see it play out in our business every day. And by the way, this isn't a victory lap for our people org. I think our leaders have set that tone from the beginning of the company. But what we have really focused on over the last couple of years is, how do you scale that? How do you take what's great about your culture and sustain that as you get to 2,000 employees and 4,000 employees and 6,000 employees, and of course our aspiration of 10 to 20,000 employees, and so that's the impact that we see in our business.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's a big question that a lot of folks are asking too, is how do you scale that culture? And I think you're right in terms of leaders and managers, you can really model that behavior and influence it. But at the end of the day, everybody who's part of the organization are culture champions and are contributing to the environment that folks work in as well. And I know at the top of the call, we talked about this changing, future of work. I've read so many articles of companies saying they're going to do flex work forever. And, employees want hybrid work, whatever that means to the company. Some people want remote forever, go back to the office 100%, get me out of my home. How is Zillow thinking about this return to work office plans, making sure employees do feel safe physically and psychologically safe as well?
Well, that's a big conversation. We could do a whole podcast just on the future of work. But I appreciate the question, Christina. We're taking a really aggressive view that we think work's going to be very different, and we acknowledged that to our employees last summer. And we have tried to create as much clarity for our employees on what our definition is of the future of work for Zillow as possible. And that started with, in the future, we believe that work is going to be hyper flexible. And so what that means for us is we've gone through and mapped every job at Zillow Group into one of 4 designations: remote, where you can live and work anywhere you want within the US or Canada; field, which is your job needs to be tied to a region or a city, but you can still work from home. You don't have to work in an office; hybrid, which is, we think, some level of time a month you're going to need to be close to one of our offices; and then for a small, less than 10% of our employees, office based, because we do work like underwriting mortgages, where there's actual compliance reasons that somebody has to be in a secure office location. But we communicated to every employee last October what their designation was, and to dimensionalize it, about 65% of our company fall into the remote and the hybrid, or the remote and the field designations, with about 25% in that hybrid and 10% in that office designation. So the first step was to create clarity for everybody on their job. And one note I would call out here is we didn't make it an individual manager decision for managers to say, well, I want my team in the office, or I want my team to be remote. We tried to do it consistently across the job function, because that, we want to be equitable here. We can't tell one group of employees you have to be in the office, and then another group doing the same exact work saying, oh, well, you can work from home. That's going to be problematic on sort of multiple levels. And so we created that clarity last October, and we've been hiring in this way. We've now hired over 1,000 employees, not located anywhere near our current offices, over the course of the last year. And so we are really projecting that the world is going to be different. And the flexibility that gives us is we're not feeling this pressure of, you've got to get people back to the office, because our employees, we recognize that all of us feel trapped in our homes because we're working at home in a pandemic. But we think that's going to feel very different as people get vaccines, and as people can get back to the connections that matter most to them, whether that's, for me, getting my daughter to high school. For some people, it's the ability to see their parents that they haven't seen in a year. I mean, there's just a lot of emotions right now that are trapped within us that we want to give people the time to get comfortable again in their life before they have to make a decision about whether or not to be in the office. And of course, we recognize some people today, like where you're living in New York, are like, they're in a small space, and so our offices are available if you're in a tough working situation. But we're really holding off on going back to the office until, one, we've redesigned the office for hybrid work, because you're going to have teams that are spread out. So we want to make sure it's not chaos when people come back to the office. And then two, we really want to understand where COVID is at. I think a lot of us are dealing with mixed messages right now. And it's like, one day it's everybody's vaccinated, get back to normal. And then the next day, hospitals are filling up in certain places. And so there's a lot of mixed messages. And right now, our message is, one, everybody's a little burnt out. So we want our employees to get some meaningful time off this summer. Two, we got to get back to our normal lives first for ourselves, our friends, and our families. Then we'll worry about coming back to the office. And three, the pressure's on our team. We got to get these offices set up for a different reality, because going back to the old world of desk just doesn't, it feels archaic. And I don't think that's what employees are going to want. And certainly, you and I are probably in the same boat. The commute that you used to have to the office, I just think commutes are dead. I think employees are not going to want to do them, at least not daily. I think you may want to do it a day a week or even twice a week, but I just think employees are going to have more power than they've ever had, and that both excites me and quasi terrifies me. But we're trying to make sure that our employees know they're going to have that power, and that we articulate, okay, what are the parameters on that power so we can still run a responsible business.
Yeah, there seems like to be a lot of intentionality behind these decisions. And I appreciate that it's not a one size fits all approach, and, delineating it out in terms of job function. And it's good to hear in terms of accessibility as well for job opportunities for fully remote jobs or hybrid. You're able to hire more folks as well, where Zillow, may not have an office, but for New Yorkers like myself, going into the office is an option, which is really great. And we've dug a little bit into the future of work. We talked about how we could have a whole discussion around what's happening here, but is there anything that we haven't discussed or you want to kind of tell the audience more about in terms of what you're continually seeing in the people space that will really impact the future of, us going to work in this, quote unquote new normal that folks need to look out for in order to be successful in the future?
Yeah, I think the thing that I continue to reflect on over the course of the last year just the changing nature of what being a manager is. It is, it's such a difficult challenge. There's so many needs that employees have. And I think one of the enduring aspects of the pandemic are going to be, I think we're still a lot more open and honest and vulnerable now. I mean, I think of how many times in the course of the last year have you seen our families on screen, our cats, our dogs. How many times have we been emotional on screen? And I think managers used to be the best at the thing that they did. And we're increasingly asking managers to support the weight of humanity, the weight of gender issues in the workplace, the weight of racial issues in the workplace, generational issues, which are to me very real, that we're seeing, the stress in our customers and the people that we're trying to support. And so I just think we have a lot of work as a whole system in the workplace, and that's HR professionals, that's executives, but that's employees as well. Mm-hmm. I think to recognize how hard their managers have to work to balance all of the things that we as individuals need and look for out of our managers, but also deliver results and deliver sustainable, ethical business results, which are, these are terms that we all throw around on social media very easily. But living your values, it is really, really hard because there's so many things that you have to be accountable for on a daily basis. And so I think it's a great conversation to continue to explore in your podcast. I think AllVoices has been a great tool for us to just also get a sense of where maybe are we struggling to get it right with a management team, so that we can go and help, not necessarily punish, but go and help, because it feels really big. And I think about myself as a manager of even my direct reports. There's tremendous need that those incredible professionals have. It's heavy and it's hard, and I should be the person who's one of the best at it in the organization, and I fall down routinely. And so I think a little bit more. I think employees are getting great at being vulnerable about their gaps and the needs. I think we've got a little work to do to normalize managers being vulnerable and acknowledging that their jobs are hard, and us collectively helping them, not just HR training them differently, but also their employees being patient, giving them some space, giving them honest feedback, and encouraging them, because I think you get that culture. It's like any relationship. Culture flows back and forth in that dance of speaking and listening. And so that's the only other piece that we kind of haven't touched on that I think is a really important conversation that we need to keep going in businesses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, it might be a hot take, but there are no born people managers. There are born leaders and visionaries, but people managers need support. And I think that 360-degree support from employees, team members, other managers, and just, I think it's really important to offer that, especially now. And the role of managers, you're right, is changing really drastically as well. Are there any other kind of really hard parts of your job as the ultimate manager, as chief people officer, that folks might not know, that you kind of work on a daily basis, or just, anything that you would want to share there?
Oh, I think we've talked about most of it. For me, I just continue to try to grow myself as a manager, and I think the hardest part about being an HR professional is you're just trying to make space for all the voices, and there's a lot of voices, and sort of sometimes every voice wants to be the most important voice, and so that isn't right or wrong to me. It just is, and I think we're getting better as companies, and I think we're getting better as a profession at making space for those voices. Now, the real challenge ahead of us for I think the next number of years is, okay, how do we move from making space to making change? And that's the piece that is going to be a balance of data driven insights and how do you actually hold yourself accountable on that front, but also how do you really activate at a manager level, and how do you move it from the executive team and the HR team really caring about some of these challenges to everybody who touches your employees caring about the challenges that they face, and so that's the journey that we're on, and certainly that's the place I'm open to listen and get advice, because I know, we're not perfect, and we learn a lot from other organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the next step, right? It's you're ingesting all this feedback, listening to all voices, and then we hold ourselves accountable and we have to take action and meaningful action and continuously get that feedback and then iterate on what has already been in place. So it's definitely an interesting process, and people need to be adaptable as well. I guess on the flip side, I'm sure you have a lot of them over the past 5 years, but what is one of your proudest moments at Zillow Group?
I mean, this will sound cheesy to say, but it's this week. We just found out on Monday that we placed 47th on the Fortune 100 best places to work in America. And thank you. It was super humbling. I mean, my team, just shout out to them. What they've had to navigate over the last year to create that environment to support our employees through the unimaginable. Most of the company just kind of had to do their job, but do it from home last year. Our people team had to do their job in a crisis and start creating the future of work at the same time. And that is a tremendous challenge that we really rose to. And to be included on that list anywhere, I think is just great validation of the culture that our employees create. It's not created by our people org. We just try to sustain it. But proudest moment of my career by far.
Oh my gosh, and it's so recent. Congratulations. I think that's awesome and a real testament to the culture and the team, especially during a really hard and trying year as well. Also, another question just about you and your experience too. What's one thing that folks would be surprised to know about you?
Oh, gosh. I have lived and worked on 3 different continents. So I obviously am from the US, but was lucky enough to study and live in Russia, and then was lucky enough to live in China for 3 years early in my career, and really had just an amazing experience learning about business in Asia and learning about business in China, and was a very shaping experience for me in the early stage of my career. So really have a passion for global work, which is funny because Zillow's only in the US and Canada, but I have a real passion for what global work looks like. And I think the future of global work is also a fascinating conversation as workforces now really are going to be able to distribute around the world, not just around all 50 states. So I think that's a really exciting topic.
That is really exciting. And I also didn't know that. That's amazing. And I'm sure there are people,
surprised you.
Yeah, surprised me. And I'm sure there are folks who are listening who are like, I now, and are listening because they did want to join the Zillow Group team. Is there any advice that you would give to people who are applying to the variety of different roles that Zillow has open?
I mean, just apply, apply, and let's have a conversation. I think there's, we really focus on people who are interested in really redefining work, redefining the way that they do the thing that they do. So it's not about having the perfect resume. It's about having that growth mindset to be a part of a company that's trying to think very differently about the challenges that we're solving. So apply. We are now, we've gone in the pandemic. This is a fun fact. The start of the pandemic, we had employees that lived in 24 states. As of today, we have employees in all 50 states in the US. So wherever you live, there's probably a job that you could do at Zillow Group. So I love screaming that from the rooftops because I'm fascinated that we have people in Alaska and Hawaii now, but we're really excited. So apply. Let's talk.
Amazing. Well, we'll link the website in the bio as well, so folks can check out your career site and also your equity and belonging site as well. I know I can't believe we're coming up on our last minute here, but is there anything else that you would like to share with the folks who are listening, around company culture or your experience that we haven't touched on? I know we talked about a lot, so maybe there's not, but always like to ask.
Yeah, I'll just leave folks with one last bit of advice that, I always get the question, sort of, what's career advice that you would give to folks? One of the things that I see every day and have for a long time now that I've been doing this is people make really big career decisions just based on what they want right now,
Mhm.
not necessarily what they want to set themselves up for in the future. And so one piece of advice I always give people is you can always opt out of a career path, but you can't always opt into a career path. So leave as many options open for yourself for the future as possible. And I talk to employees every day who say, I don't want to be an executive. I don't want that stress. I don't want to do this job, or I don't want to do that job. Don't shut yourself off. You may not want it today, but you may feel very different in 10 years. And so the best way to build your career is say, hey, what can I go learn in this next opportunity? Because I want the maximum range of outcomes available to me down the road. And I think when people do that, they really put themselves in a position to have more choices in the future. And your career is not necessarily about maximizing everything right now. It's about giving yourself the maximum number of options 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so I just really encourage folks, next time you want to say, oh, I don't want to do that, maybe stop and think, well, gosh, am I going to feel that way 5 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, or if my life situation changes? Don't lock yourself off from opportunities because maybe they're intimidating, or it's something you haven't done before. Give yourself as many options down the road as possible.
Yeah, I love that advice. Give yourself as many options. There's so many opportunities out there, and you never know. You never know what's out there. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking early this morning. We really appreciate it. And we will talk soon.
Absolutely, Christina. Thanks so much for this important conversation and keeping the conversation going. I look forward to hearing your other episodes.
Yes, we will talk soon. At AllVoices, we believe in the empowerment of employees to speak up, and creating a place where employees speak up is important to have for everyone in the organization to succeed. We will talk later, Dan.
Awesome. Bye-bye.